All right, good morning. God damn it. Today I'm talking about how to bounce back from injury. So, maybe 5.5 months, 6 months ago, I tore my bicep and it sucks. And if any of you guys out there are watching and have recently injured yourself, it sucks. But I've spent the last 6 months bouncing back. So, I want to go over the tips I've used. And I mean, a lot of this isn't really going to be physio stuff because my torn bicep, unless you have a torn bicep, uh, I won't really be able to tell you what you can do for a knee. Some of the principles will apply though, in regards to physio, but more sort of psychological tricks or ways around, and just things that I wish I kind of knew when I first tore my bicep in jiu-jitsu. So that's what we're gonna go for. And I mean, I'm not 100% healed yet. You can see my right bicep is quite a bit. I don't know if you can see it in the fucking frame, but it's quite a bit bigger than the left still, but maybe by an inch. But yeah, I've recovered well. So let's get into it. So the first one is chill for a bit and smell the flowers. This isn't easy, and I wasn't very good at this one. I was probably back to training within a week of tearing my bicep. I was in a sling post surgery. I was training actually the day after I tore my bicep. Like before I got the surgery, I was training, which is fine until they reattach it. Then, the anesthesia or the anesthetic hadn't worn off yet, and I was still training like an idiot. But I did kind of rein it back, and I remember the first thing I did was just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna watch the whole entirety of Breaking Bad with my girlfriend. It was just like I don't ever watch TV shows, I don't watch movies, I don't really. That's never been me. But when I tore the bicep, I'm like, I'm gonna take a step back and I'm gonna watch Breaking Bad all day and just chill and just take my mind off the fact that I can't be training like crazy and focus on chilling. But then also I got into some reading, and then I started actually spending more time reading more recent exercise science, just because I thought if I'm not training, well, I may as well be learning about training. And I haven't looked into exercise science in quite some time since studying for personal training certificates. And I learned quite a bit. And then I retrospectively just chilled out and thought about my training, sort of just meditated on my training and how I could adjust it in the future to make it safer, to make it more effective, and just chilled out. Like there's not much you can do, so you may as well just relax and focus on something else, or just stop being such a go-getting fucking smegma male for a minute, like me, just constantly going at the training, and it's just you gotta let go sometimes. So that's the first thing, is you just gotta learn how to chill out. You won't have to chill out for long. I was back to training within a week, but just for the first few days, just fucking chill the fuck out. Take a break from training. Then, once you've chilled out for a few weeks, maybe, in my case, a fucking week, know that there's pretty big gains coming, depending on what you've torn or injured. So in my case, I tore my bicep. So obviously, upper body training was going to be pretty hell impeded, but I could still train legs. So I ended up going, all right, I'm going to just train legs more, and I'm going to focus on my leg training a bunch. For the first probably month or two, I was just really going ham on my legs. And you'd think after an injury that you'd be losing a bunch of muscle, which in the injured area I did, my left arm shrunk like crazy. I went from 17 inches to 13 inches in like 2 weeks. But my legs grew about an inch and a half within the first 3 months of my bicep tear, because my legs were getting so much needed stimulus. I mean, my leg genetics suck. I've never had great legs. And so I was focusing much more on my legs because my body couldn't really be trained all that well. And thus, big gains occurred. So, in some ways, it was a blessing in disguise, because my quads and hamstrings and glutes and calves got a bunch of love that they genuinely didn't, or generally didn't, see as much before. So understand that if you've torn, let's say you tore a quadricep, all right. I mean, I don't want to sort of test the injury gods here, but personally, if I tore my quad, I'd be like, cool, all right, let's get the fucking upper body huge. You'd just be focusing on chest, back, triceps. In my case, it was, my left bicep. So the whole upper body is basically out of the window for a little bit because you're in a sling. But if you've done something to your back or leg, then you can just train your torso for a bit, and then vice versa. If you tore a pec, a triceps, a biceps, whatever, then focus on getting massive fucking legs, because you'll be able to put more of your recovery into that area, because the rest of your body is not getting trained anywhere as much. So understand that it sucks, but there are some pretty big gains coming your way, considering that you'll be focusing on one area very specialized, like an arm wrestler or like a cyclist. The next one is finding new ways of getting around the injured area. So in the case of leg day, I was like, cool, I can train my legs still, but I can't do barbell squats because I was stuck in a sling and I couldn't put it behind my arm. Couldn't do deadlifts, couldn't do a bunch of leg exercises. So I went, all right, let me spend some money and get a hack squat machine and a Smith machine. And that way I could train my legs. And then in regards to training my upper body, well, I could still train my right arm. So that was cool. So I just kept training my right arm. And then once I was capable of doing isometrics, I'd start doing isometric side lateral raises and isometric, rows. Sort of, I'd slam my arm into the wall and just do an isometric contraction of my back to, at the very least, maintain some mass. It's not hard to maintain muscle. It's hard to build it. I would do grippers with my forearm. I would do sort of isometric movements around the board on my left side. And then at some point, when I got more range of motion through my arm, once I got out of the brace, I would just start doing more and more ranges of motion. But I was just choosing exercises that made it so I didn't have to contract my bicep. There was even ways of training my back without having any risk of hitting my bicep. I would get a resistance band and attach it around my elbow, and I could do cable rows with the band around my elbow, so that if you put it in my hand, of course, you contract your bicep. But if it was on my elbow, then I could train my back. More ideally would have been a lat pullover, like a nautilus pullover machine, because no biceps required. But the point being is there's plenty of ways of training basically everything but my bicep without contracting my bicep. And thus, my arms did shrink, but they were able to maintain a decent degree and come back quite quickly because I was creative. So there's creative ways that you can get around injuries, but you do have to be careful. But people will outright just neglect a whole side of their body or whole area of their body because of one little injury or big injury in that area, and then just inevitably shrink more than they had to. You could have done isometrics, you could have done something. So find what you can do and do it. Next is blood flow restriction training. So in regards to the actual injured area itself, when you get the A-OK from a physio or whoever to start training again, start doing blood flow restriction training, because it will artificially make you weaker, which means you can get away with lighter loads and still get a decent stimulus. And that way the tendon doesn't have to strain as much as it's in probably a somewhat sort of depreciated state. In my case, my bicep tendon was capable of lifting things, but if I pushed it too hard, it was very painful and risky. Whereas if I blood flow restricted the fuck out of my bicep, I could go from what would be a 5 kilo bicep curl, my muscle could do it, the tendon couldn't. Whereas if I just tourniqueted the fuck out of that arm, I could lift 2.5 kilos and it would feel like 5 kilos, but it was light enough that the tendon didn't get any strain. So that was one of the benefits. Another benefit is blood flow restriction training gives you a bigger pump. And when it comes to tendons, you need more blood flow into those areas to heal them because they have 10 times less blood flow than muscles. So higher rep blood flow restriction training was vital in just being able to train my bicep at the start. If it was a quad, it would be high rep quadricep extensions with extremely lightweight, with an extremely tight tourniquet. Same for a tricep, unless you're tearing like a subscap or some muscle that's impossible to tourniquet off. But most people, you're tearing a limb, and thus you just have to basically get a BFR band, tighten that motherfucker up, and you'll be able to lift significantly lighter loads, but it will still give you a decent amount of mechanical tension. Next one is isometrics. I already vaguely covered this, but yeah, if you are injured, there are certain muscles that if you go through a full range of motion, it could compromise said area, if it's a tendon tear or a ligament tear or whatever. In the case of my case, to train triceps, you ideally will extend the elbow out, right? You're going to elbow extension. But when you've tore a bicep, for the first 3 months, you can't open your arm up because the tendon has to be sort of healed up tight or tighter. And if you open it up, you could re-tear it. So what I would do as a compromise is isometrics. I would just press against the wall in an isometric contraction. Ideal? No. Especially for certain muscles like triceps where you won't hit certain heads. In the case of the triceps, my outer head didn't atrophy a whole lot on my left tricep, but my inner head atrophied heaps because in this range of motion, when you're just contracting here with an isometric, you're stimulating a shit ton of outer head, almost no inner head. You don't really stimulate the inner head until you get to full extension. So My outer head didn't atrophy at all. My inner head atrophied heaps. But it's better than atrophying all heads of the tricep or whatever muscle it is. So isometrics can be great when you can't go through full range of motions. At the very least, it will allow you to maintain a decent degree of muscles. Next point is unilateral training. So this is a no-brainer, but I mean, some nuance to this where people I've seen don't leverage this enough when they tear a limb. If you've torn 2 limbs, then so be it. But if you tear 1 limb, in my case, a bicep tear, well, for the first few months, you'll be training unilaterally because one limb just simply won't be able to be trained. So I was doing one-sided bicep curls, which is unilateral. But then once you heal it up enough that the other limb that's healing can train, you don't want to start doing easy curl bars bilaterally when one arm is 2-3 times stronger. This will never get any real stimulus because you'll have hella reps in reserve. The bar will be all toppled and weird and fucked up. But even if you've gotten maybe 50-60% strength back, you still don't want to go back to bilateral training until the limb that is injured is almost 100% healed up. So for the first 5 months, I didn't do any bilateral training for my upper body. It wouldn't make any sense because this limb would not get any stimulus and would shrink, and this limb would be at risk because it'd be just way too fucking heavy. So when you first start healing up, don't jump back into bilateral training. I've seen people do this. I don't know why they do it. They're like, all right, I'm going to start bench pressing. It's like, dude, you tore a bicep. You've got no stability on this left arm. If you try a dumbbell variation, you're going to see the massive difference. So don't just jump into bilateral training when you're feeling a little bit more healed up. Keep it unilateral until at least 90-95%. And in my case, I'm back to bilateral training in some aspects because it's more efficient, time efficient, and it's fun, and I just miss doing it. But even then, I still incorporate a bunch of unilateral training because this arm is still only maybe 90-95% of the strength of this arm, including presses, even pressing movements. I mean, it's not just the bicep dominant movements like rows or bicep curls. My presses on this arm are significantly weaker. And when I do it with a bilateral motion on a barbell, I don't really notice it as much. But as soon as you get a dumbbell, you're like, fuck, there is a big difference. I saw Eric Bugenhagen recently actually tore his quadricep or something, or a ligament or tendon maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And the man didn't know until very recently, until he tried doing a unilateral movement. He did a unilateral leg extension. He didn't realize how much weaker his left quad was. It wasn't that much smaller, but the neurological efficiency was way off. And he was like, wow, this is astounding. I didn't realize how fucking weak it was. Because when he squatted, he didn't seem to know. But until you go and do it unilaterally, you don't realize how much you're limiting yourself on these movements, which is no good for either limb. Because this limb will fail prematurely, and this limb won't grow or get any decent stimulus because there'll be plenty of reps in reserve on that side. So unilateral training, it's boring. It takes way more time, especially if you like high intensity, but it's super required when you tear one limb. Next one should be a no-brainer. This is a big mistake I got. Get a good physio. So when I first tore my bicep, I just got a general population fucking physio at the hospital. Some, noob, like total noob physio at the hospital. Some 21-year-old girl looks at me and goes, all right, all nervous, freaking out. She's like, her first day in the fucking office. I already was like, this is no good. And then she sits me down. She's like, okay, can you just extend your arm and see how much range of motion? This is like a week after my surgery. I'm like, no, because I'll re-tear my bicep if I do that. So she goes, oh, runs off, talks to her boss. He goes, absolutely not. Obviously referring to me opening my fucking arm up. She comes back. She's like, sorry, let's try something else. Suggests a totally fucking retarded thing again. And I'm like, all right, look, I'm going to go get another physio. Went to a different hospital, got a better physio. But then within 2 weeks, I asked her a simple question of, my radial nerve is being impinged. That's the nerve that runs down the back of the glenohumeral joint. Just questioning her to make sure she knows her shit. She says, I don't know where that nerve runs. And so I spent 2 weeks, vital weeks of my physio with a physio that didn't really know what she was doing. This could have been absolutely vital for the permanence of getting my arm back. I might not never quite get my arm fully back now due to 3 weeks of inept physio. When you've injured something, especially a bicep tear or tendon tears, ligament tears in general, those first few weeks and months are vital for what happens in the next year or two. Because if you don't physio it right, you don't get the right range of motions back, you don't get the right nerve flossing, all these different things, you're going to run into a fuck ton of problems that are almost impossible to fix later on. So I'd highly suggest getting a good physio. Don't get some hospital physio that they allocate to you. Go to a private guy. Make sure he fucking knows his shit and heal up quicker. Health is wealth. And that's one thing I wish I did, because I am suffering some things to this day that may or may not have been had I got a good physio. This goes for surgeons too. If you have the money, I had to go through public hospital. I had trainees do my surgery. There was no other option. I'm just fucking poor. But if you're rich, pay the fucking money, get a fucking really good surgeon to do it, because I see all these professional strongmen who have millions of dollars, they tear their biceps doing stone lifts or whatever. 3 weeks later, they're doing fucking kettlebell swings. So there's something that they're doing I don't know about because I'm not rich. So get a good physio, get a good surgeon. The last point is more of a psychological point. Time goes fast. I think back 5 months ago when I first tore my bicep, it was fucked. The first week was hell. I'm allergic to painkillers. I didn't sleep for a fucking week. I still had to work because what am I going to go hungry and fucking homeless? So I was in severe agony, like unbelievable pain, seriously depressed, and anesthesia. Oh yeah, and I got overdosed on anesthetics. I did 4 hours of anesthesia instead of 1, and because I was allergic to endones, I had a whole bunch of health complications post surgery. But boohoo, poor me. But this is the thing. When I look back on that, it's like a faded memory. It goes quick. 5 months, 6 months, however long it takes to recover from whatever injury you've sustained, it's gonna go quick. And understand that once it's over, you'll be like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Time to get big again. And then you'll have all these newfound, inspirations and aspirations for training. I know I sure do. As soon as this bicep is 100% back, if it comes 100% back, I can't wait. It's going to be sick to get back way back into that big bulk stage, get big and nasty and strong. It'll be sick. And I've learnt plenty of things along the way. A whole bunch of like ego destroying, truths like we're all gonna die and this body is not fucking, indestructible. The tendons and ligaments and bones and shit, they can all break and you're all gonna die. And there's a whole bunch of things you learn from injuries, but it goes by fast. And you just gotta just silver line it, man. You can't just sit there and be all fucking boohoo, poor me, like it sucks. Yeah, but you'll go through it and it goes fast and you'll learn a bunch from it. And that's my takes on how to bounce back from injury without going fucking mad. Anyway, that's it for today. Peace out. Bye.